Welcome to Second Take, the show that focuses on the issues behind the news. The US government this week unveiled its Doing Business in Africa campaign. Terence Creamer was at the Johannesburg launch and joins me to discuss the initiative. Terence, welcome to Second Take. What exactly is Doing Business in Africa and how did it come about?
Well, in June this year, we had a quite high-profile delegation of Americans coming to Africa, including South Africa, led by Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. And they also unveiled the strategy for sub-Saharan Africa. So there's this bigger strategy document that looks at all the trade and investment, but also the non-economic and sort of peace and security dimensions of the relationship between the US and Africa. And the Department of Commerce basically have taken that and built on it from a business perspective and have looked at this Doing Business in Africa campaign. It really focuses on raising, the visibility of Africa amongst US business people and investors, as well as traders, as well as the visibility of Africa's growth, seeing that 6 of the 10 fastest growing economies in the world are now in Africa. And there was a realization that actually that US business and entrepreneurs at most levels don't have good insight into Africa. So Doing Business for Africa is about changing that. And President Barack Obama, who has African roots, he wrote this week in the US about this Doing Business for Africa and about the need to raise America's trade and investment game and to understand that there's a whole new atmosphere of growth in Africa and across this continent that was really seen as a place really for aid and poverty relief. So the campaign was launched yesterday in Johannesburg and has been taken to East Africa now. And it really has a few pillars to it, but it's really about inside government, people that interact with business on a regular basis, giving those people a sensitivity to Africa, being able to explain the sectors, the markets that are rising in Africa, the projects, the tenders. And then outside of government, they're going to be working with different organizations to have African summits next year. So in the US, there's going to be a number of summits where ambassadors from different African countries are invited to come and speak to US business. And generally also having a lot more trade missions, a lot more visibility of US companies, but really greater sharing of information around South Africa and Africa's business opportunities.
President Obama has been criticized by some for a lack of engagement with Africa during his first term. Are there any signs that this could change during the second term?
Well, it can't get worse than the first term, many would say. He did have that big speech laying out his vision for the new relationship between Africa and the US in Ghana. But he spent probably less than 2 days on the continent, so he didn't really have a lot of time, personal time, engaging with a continent that many would say is, he has personal associations with. His father is from Kenya. He grew up outside of Africa. I mean, he grew up in Asia and in the US, but he has this affinity, this parental link to Africa. So there was a lot of excitement when he was elected the first time round, and we even had a national holiday in Kenya, I think, when he was elected because of his Kenyan heritage. And there was an expectation that he was going to raise the whole profile, the whole relationship between the US and Africa. And I think most people were, somewhat surprised at how little was done in this area. And I think a lot of effort was made over the last few months to explain, the priority for any US president over the last 4 years had to be the US economy and its problems and dealing with it. And really that has also been, during the election campaign, it was very much about the domestic issues and the domestic agenda. But I think there are signs. I mean, there was this US strategy that was launched in June. We now have this Doing Business in Africa campaign that's been launched at the end of the year. And there are signs that he's going to raise a lot of international dimension to his presidency, but I think a lot more around Africa. The other thing is it coincides with the period where some serious decisions have to be made around the Africa Growth and Opportunity Act in the US and the continuation of that beyond 2015. So whether whoever was president at this period is going to have to give some attention, that administration is going to have to give some attention to that issue and to Africa, and whether it should be extended and on what terms. So I think there's the signs that there's a strategy in place and there's these campaigns that are happening, but there's also some sort of important decisions to be made around Africa. And then it's also coinciding with Africa's re-emergence as a new growth frontier. So not just the US, but every single economic bloc and country is paying a lot more attention to Africa, whether it's Europe, the traditional colonial powers, whether it's the new BRICS, or whether it's the Southeast Asian countries and also Japan. All of these countries have got an interest in raising their African profile and African investment and African trade because of this growth that we're seeing in the continent. So it's not just America. America's going to find it's quite a competitive place, and I think they realize that, and they are throwing down the gauntlet to say we're ready and willing to compete.
There is some concern here in South Africa about whether the benefits of AGOA would be extended to South Africa beyond 2015. Could you shed any light?
Well, there is concern because, South Africa is not necessarily seen as the most deserving country for something like 6,400 tariff lines free entry into the world's largest economy. America, as we know, is going through a difficult patch. They're very inward focused around that. There are hackles raised when they feel that maybe American business isn't getting the benefits that, say, other businesses are, and there's not level playing fields. And then we've seen South Africa during this period join the BRICS bloc. I think there will be questions raised amongst possibly more parochial Congress people and senators saying, do we really need to give a BRICS country this sort of access to our economy when we are really struggling with our own issues around survival? So I think there will be issues, and these were flagged last year very clearly by our ambassador to the US, Ambassador Rasool, who said, we need to set up a really clear strategy around communicating the benefits to the US of sustaining AGOA. At the moment, trade between the US and Africa is around $95 billion, which sounds big, but actually it's a very small part of US trade. Less than 3% of all total US trade with the world is represented in that number. It is growing, but the balance is also in South Africa's favour, for instance. So there will be questions asked. And I think that during 2013 and 2014, these 2 years are going to be crucial for our lobbying efforts into the US to explain why we think we would like an extension of the benefits. That would be first prize. I don't think that's going to happen. But at least to sustain these benefits beyond 2015, because a lot of industries in South Africa do benefit from these tariff lines being open. In particular, our automotive sector is a big beneficiary. And, it would be quite problematic if suddenly we were, having to have tariff barriers reintroduced on some of our products. So it's a big issue, and it's one that I think is going to receive a lot of attention at home. I think the rest of Africa probably is less vulnerable than South Africa, but still, the rest of Africa also has to make its lobbying efforts known as to why AGOA has been good for it. Although most countries can access very few of those 6,400 tariff lines, there are still industries in Lesotho that are ready, and other poor countries that have really developed around AGOA, around especially the apparel sector. So it's important for jobs, it's important for trade that is sustained. So all of Africa are going to have to make that case to Congress and to who it's not just the administration that calls this tune. And South Africa in particular is going to have a big lobbying effort on its hands to convince US lawmakers. I think the administration's on side. I think the Obama administration would like to see it rolled over. But even this week, Acting Secretary of Commerce Rebecca Blank made it very clear that, if the answer to the level playing field question doesn't seem to come back as a positive, there will be those in Congress that will be hesitant in just extending the benefits of AGOA for another period and extending all the benefits to a country like South Africa.
Terence, thank you very much. That is the Second Take show for this week. Thank you for watching and join us again next time for more news analysis.